Hi everyone, this is my run on the Chosen King's Future Chaos Challenge fight, which is Ardyn's debut event. And I'll just be quickly going through the overview of the fight and the party setup before we jump into the battle. So the fight has two waves, and the first wave consists of Lightning, Noctis, and Lock mannequins, which are typically having the same skills as your own party members. Do take note though that of these three, the Noctis mannequin also has a recast ability, which is the same EX as your own Noctis. And therefore, he should be the one that is focused down first. Other than that, the Lock mannequin also has the Phoenix Ray ability, which not only does party-wide HP damage to you, but it also heals the enemy party. So my opinion is that beyond Noctis, the Lock should be the secondary target. Lightning can also be dangerous because Lightning also does have a Brave to HP attack in her Flourish of Steel, but from what I see, she won't normally use it unless that attack will kill off a character. Normally she will either do just a normal Brave attack or a Spark Strike, which is just another form of Brave attack. So of these three mannequins, I think Lightning is probably the least dangerous of the three. On the second wave, you have Ifrit, which is the same Ifrit as you see in the World of Illusions. Now this Ifrit doesn't start the fight with his recast ability. I believe he's 2 turns away from the recast ability at the start. But the recast ability is otherwise the usual Hellfire attack. And do note that Hellfire does add Scorch to the field, which acts as an aura that saps your party's Brave, and it also grants a buff to itself called Scorching Inferno. And my strategy here is to try to do as much damage as I can before he uses his recast ability, and that's why I also summoned before he uses the recast ability the first time. Other than that, it's a pretty straightforward fight. Ifrit is heavily resistant to magic, but that doesn't matter in the challenge, Chaos Challenge quest, because none of the synergy units are magic based anyway, so the magic resistance doesn't matter. Now for this Chaos Challenge, as usual, you need to use 3 boosted characters if you are aiming for a full mission complete. And there are only 3 boosted characters. So as far as party setup goes, if you're aiming to complete all the mission objectives, you don't really have a choice. You have to use Ardyn, Lilisette, and Maria. The good news is that this Chaos Challenge is not that difficult compared to other Chaos Challenges we've faced in the past. And most people would have pulled for Ardyn anyway, and Ardyn is quite powerful to the point that he's actually able to carry and undergear Lilisette and Maria. Now I did not manage to get Ardyn's burst weapon, so if you have Ardyn's burst weapon on top of this, it makes the fight much more easier. And there are players reporting that with a fully decked out Ardyn with his burst weapon, you can actually get by a full complete with Lilisette and Maria with just their 15 and 35 CP. That being said though, if you pull on Ardyn's banner, there is a high chance that you will get at least somewhat decently geared Lilisette and Maria. So as far as the party setup that I used, my Ardyn is full 3-3 with his LD but without his burst weapon. I have him fully boarded in his character and summon boards, but I do not have any of his artifacts. As you can see, I did not want to use any artifact tokens on him at this point of the game. My Lilisette is 1 out of 3 realization, and my Maria is 0 out of 3 realization. I used a book on Maria just to get the free ingot. But otherwise, you do not actually even need to use a book to realize both Lilisette and Maria, um, even if you have their EX weapons. Lilisette is pretty outdated at this point in time. She didn't get a rework with this event, so her kit is somewhat outdated. And if you don't have her realized, I wouldn't recommend spending tomes or ingots on her. And as far as summon, I used Leviathan for its useful speed down on the fight. But beyond that, also because Ardyn's LD reduces his HP to 0, using his LD also automatically activates Leviathan's Blessing, which means Ardyn will have a permanent Brave Regen effect for the entire fight, which can be pretty helpful in the fight. So with that, let's move on to the actual battle. See you there. Okay, so starting off on the first wave, my focus is on the Noctis mannequin, which is the one in the middle. And ideally, you want to try to start off with Ardyn getting the first turn out of your party. And if you do get that, it's good for him to use 2 Warp Strikes back to back on 2 different targets. So here I use Warp Strike on Noctis, followed by the Lock Mannequin. And the reason for this is if his Warp Strike breaks a target, it increases the stack of his Spectral Charge. So you can see now that he has 5 stacks. And that is important because that actually converts his EX into the ++ form. I then followed up with 1 charge of his LD to put him into the overkill stance. So the reason for this is that the buff from his LD also does increase his attack potencies, which helps, and it's also helpful if the enemies happen to target him. Essentially, he can't be killed. I did save the rest of his LD charges for the second wave, and I'm thankful that I did, because I realized near the end that beyond the first LD charge, I needed the rest to make sure that he stays in his overkill buff state for the entire fight with Ifrit. So Ardyn tanked Noctis' recast ability. If Noctis was targeting someone else with his recast ability, it doesn't do that much damage if Lilisette has debuffed the entire enemy party. Just make sure that whoever Noctis is targeting with his EX has some Brave to tank the hit and it doesn't break them. With Lilisette, the main aim is to apply her debuffs through her S2, so that will significantly reduce the incoming damage from the enemy party, as well as grant a very useful sap effect on the enemy party. Her S1 also inflicts speed down, which makes the fight much more manageable. And right here, you'll notice that because the enemies are heavily debuffed, their turns come much later, and I abuse this delay by maximizing on the launch potential on the enemy party. Beyond this, it's pretty much straightforward for the rest of the first wave. With Ardyn, I tried to save more of his Warp Strike compared to his S2 because I felt that his Warp Strike has higher damage potencies, and the second wave is a single target fight, which I think Warp Strike will do more damage. Do note that his S2 grants him the Shadow Step buff, so you don't want to completely use all his S2 skills, and you need to save a few so that you can reapply his Shadow Step buff during the second wave. If you need to save on skill users, if Ardyn can break an enemy unit it's actually better to use his HP plus plus attack to break the unit, because he has the potent Brave Regen from Leviathan anyway. And so using his HP plus plus will still deal quite a lot of damage with the follow-up attack as well. And after that he gets a consecutive turn, which you can then use one of his 2 skill users there to maximize on damage potential. Throughout the fight, it's important to keep an eye on the buffs on Ardyn, because you don't want his Shadow Step and his Overkill buff to run out. Over here, his Overkill buff did finish, but like I said, I didn't want to waste his LD skill for the remainder on the first wave, since the Lightning Mannequin is almost dead. And the Lightning Mannequin isn't targeting Ardyn anyway, so I don't think he needs the buff yet. And I purposely saved his LD for the second wave of the fight, and then just finished the Lightning Mannequin off with the plain attacks that he has. Okay, so starting on the second wave, Ifrit doesn't immediately use his recast ability like the one in the World of Illusions. So I took the opportunity to quickly use Ardyn's LD so that he goes back into his overkill state to prepare for the eventual Hellfire recast ability from Ifrit. Ifrit doesn't do that much damage even with his Hellfire attack, because your entire party are boosted characters anyway, so they have quite a significant amount of HP. So even Lilisette and Maria can very comfortably tank Ifrit's recast ability, and Maria can then heal after that with her S2. Now, the early part of the second wave, I planted debuffs on Ifrit with Lilisette because I was aiming to summon before Ifrit could use his recast ability. So having the debuffs help, especially the speed down debuff, because that combined with Leviathan really reduces the speed and therefore number of turns that Ifrit can take. Okay, I decided to pop my summon here because Ifrit is 2 turns away from his recast ability. On hindsight, I think I probably should have waited a bit further down the road, but this fight is pretty loose in its requirement and pretty forgiving, so I think overall it doesn't really matter. As long as you use the summon before he uses Hellfire. And again, you can probably save the summon for the later parts of the fight if you wish, but I feel using it earlier in this case is better so that you can maximize damage before Ifrit applies the Scorch field effect. Because having sap on your characters, of course, then reduces the damage potential that they can do. Okay, so Ifrit has used Hellfire, the Scorch effect is in play, and Ifrit also has a framed buff that gives him a Brave Region as well as I believe additional defense, which makes it a little bit more challenging to push damage through. From here on in, it still isn't too difficult. The idea is just to be a bit conservative with your skill users, particularly if Maria and Lilisette are not at full 3-3 realization. Even though Ifrit has increased defenses, with this party setup, it doesn't matter too much because both Lilisette and Maria has Brave Battery built into their skill set. And so in a way your party bypasses Ifrit's high defense because they'll be dealing damage coming from a Brave Battery source instead of Brave damage on Ifrit. Because Ardyn has very high attack potencies, he can still deal nearly capped damage on Ifrit, even with the buff that Ifrit has and having the Scorch effect on the field. You do want to be somewhat conservative with Ardyn's overkill buff, which is comes from his LD. So try not to use his LD too early because you need it to refresh the overkill buff. Letting it fall off can be dangerous because when Ardyn's at low HP, obviously he will then die through Ifrit's Blaze HP attack or Ifrit's recast ability of Hellfire. Beyond all this, there's really nothing much else to note. Like I mentioned, this challenge chaos fight is actually quite easy compared to the other challenge chaos fights. And as long as you try to space out skill users so that your characters can have enough longevity to last the entire fight, you're pretty much fine. If it will go down without too much trouble, and even if he gets to another recast ability or even the third or fourth time, you can comfortably survive, so long as Ardyn still has his overkill buff from his LD active at all times. If for some reason you find yourself running out of his LD buff too early, then that means that you should probably try to be a bit more conservative with its skill use on the first wave. Having said that, I don't think it should happen because you can see I managed to make his overkill buff last the entire fight, even with far from optimal Lilisette and Maria. So I think you should be able to make it through without too much issues with Ardyn. So the rest of the fight on the second wave is mainly about keeping the buffs active on your entire party. So essentially using skills to refresh the buff when the buff counts are low, while also dealing damage to Ifrit. With Ardyn, if his skill count runs low against him as wave 1, I think the best way is to then use his HP plus attack to break Ifrit if Ifrit has some brave, and then using the skills on the free consecutive turn. And I think that approach maximizes Ardyn's damage potential without using too many of his ability users. And that's it. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, do leave a like, subscribe, or leave a comment in the comment section. As always, thank you.